A locked room, a pilot's last radio call, a ship found floating with no one aboard. Every one of these cases comes with a paper trail, a search effort, and a stubborn final question. Where did they go? These are the disappearances that investigators have never closed. Counting down the 10 most baffling unsolved disappearances on record. Number 10. The Sodder Children. On Christmas Eve, 1945, a house fire destroyed the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia. 5 of the 10 Sodder children were never recovered from the wreckage. Their parents, George and Jenny, believed the fire was a cover. No bones, no teeth, no DNA from the children were ever found in the ashes. For decades, the Sodders received anonymous letters and grainy photographs claiming to show their missing children alive in other parts of the country. One photograph mailed in 1968 allegedly showed their son Louis as an adult. No verified contact was ever made. The case is still officially open with the West Virginia State Police. Number 9. Jimmy Hoffa. On the 30th of July, 1975, the former Teamsters Union president Jimmy Hoffa walked into the parking lot of the Machu's Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Township, Michigan. He was expecting to meet 2 mob figures. He was never seen again. FBI investigators have spent 5 decades following leads. The leading theory is that Hoffa was killed within hours of his disappearance over a turf war with Detroit and New Jersey crime families. Searches have been conducted at horse farms, landfills, a New Jersey football stadium, and most recently in 2021 under the Pulaski Skyway in New Jersey. Every search has come up empty. Hoffa was legally declared dead in 1982. His body has never been recovered. Number 8. Frederick Valentic. On the 21st of October 1978, a 20-year-old Australian pilot named Frederick Valentic was on a training flight in a single-engine Cessna 182 over the Bass Strait. During his radio call to air traffic control, Valentic reported being followed by a long metallic object that hovered above his aircraft. His final transmission contained the words, "It is not an aircraft." What followed was 17 seconds of metallic scraping sounds on the radio. Then, silence. No wreckage, no oil slick, no body, and no engine debris were ever recovered. Australian authorities officially classified the case as presumed lost, with the cause listed as unknown. To this day, the recording of Valentic's final transmission remains one of the most analyzed pieces of aviation audio in history. Number 7. The crew of the Mary Celeste. On the 5th of December 1872, the British ship Dei Gratia found the American merchant brigantine Mary Celeste, drifting in the Atlantic Ocean, about 400 miles east of the Azores. The ship was seaworthy. The cargo of denatured alcohol was largely intact. The lifeboat was missing. The captain, Benjamin Briggs, his wife, his 2-year-old daughter, and 7 crew members had vanished. The ship's logbook had been kept current up until 10 days earlier. Personal belongings, food stores, and even the captain's pipe were left behind. Theories have ranged from rogue waves and alcohol fumes igniting to mutiny and piracy. None has ever been proven. The Mary Celeste is still the most famous ghost ship in maritime history. Number 6. D.B. Cooper. On the 24th of November 1971, a man calling himself Dan Cooper boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305 in Portland, Oregon. He carried a briefcase. He claimed it contained a bomb. He demanded $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. After the plane refueled in Seattle, he released the passengers, kept the crew, and ordered the aircraft to fly toward Mexico City at low altitude. Somewhere over the Pacific Northwest, in driving rain and freezing temperatures, Cooper opened the rear stairway of the 727 and jumped. He disappeared into the wilderness with the cash. In 1980, a young boy found about $5,800 of the marked ransom bills along the Columbia River. The rest has never been recovered. In 2016, the FBI officially closed the active investigation after 45 years without identifying Cooper or finding his body. It remains the only unsolved hijacking in United States aviation history. Number 5. Lord Lucan. Richard John Bingham, the 7th Earl of Lucan, was a British aristocrat professional gambler, and the chief suspect in the murder of his children's nanny, Sandra Rivet. On the night of the 7th of November, 1974, Rivet was bludgeoned to death in the basement of the family's London home. Lord Lucan visited a friend's house later that night, telephoned his mother, and then disappeared. His car was found abandoned in the coastal town of New Haven, Sussex, blood-stained, with a piece of lead pipe in the trunk. He was never seen again. Sightings were reported for decades in South Africa, Australia, India, and Botswana. none was ever confirmed. In 1999, Lord Lucan was declared legally dead. In 2016, his death certificate was finally issued. Whether he killed himself, fled abroad, or was hidden by aristocratic friends, remains one of Britain's most enduring cold cases. Number 4. Amelia Earhart. On the 2nd of July, 1937, the aviator Amelia Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan took off from Lafe, New Guinea, attempting to complete a circumnavigation of the globe in a twin-engine Lockheed Electra. Their next stop was Howland Island, a tiny strip of land in the central Pacific Ocean. They never arrived. The United States Navy launched what was at the time the largest and most expensive air and sea search in American history. Nothing was found. Theories have ranged from a simple fuel exhaustion crash into deep ocean, to a survival landing on the uninhabited Nikumaroro Island, to capture by the Japanese military. In recent decades, expeditions to Nikumaro have recovered tantalizing artifacts: a fragment of aluminum, a jar that may have held Freckle Cream bones that were later lost. Nothing definitive has ever been confirmed. Earhart's disappearance remains one of the most famous unsolved cases in 20th century history. Number 3. Flight 19. On the 5th of December 1945, 5 United States Navy Avenger torpedo bombers took off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on a routine training mission over the Atlantic. 13 pilots and crew were aboard. About 90 minutes into the flight, the squadron leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, reported that his compasses had failed and that he did not know his position. Radio transmissions over the next 2 hours became increasingly disoriented. At one point, Taylor was overheard telling his pilots that the ocean below looked unfamiliar. All 5 aircraft and all 13 men disappeared. Worse, one of the rescue flying boats sent to search for them, a Martin Mariner with 13 crewmen aboard, also vanished, with a possible explosion seen by a passing ship. No confirmed wreckage from any of the 6 aircraft has ever been definitively identified. Flight 19 is one of the foundational mysteries of the so-called Bermuda Triangle. Number 2. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. On the 8th of March 2014, a Boeing 777 with 239 people aboard took off from Kuala Lumpur bound for Beijing. About 40 minutes into the flight, the aircraft's transponder was switched off. The plane then made a sharp turn back across the Malay Peninsula and flew for over 7 hours, eventually crossing into the southern Indian Ocean. Then, somewhere over one of the most remote stretches of ocean on Earth, it ran out of fuel and went down. The official search covered over 120,000 square kilometers of seafloor and cost more than $150 million. A handful of confirmed wreckage pieces eventually washed up on the coasts of Madagascar, Reunion Island, and South Africa. The main wreckage and the flight data recorders have never been found. What happened in the cockpit during those final hours remains contested. It is the deadliest aviation mystery of the modern era, and the #1 most baffling unsolved disappearance. The Roanoke Colony. In 1587, 115 English settlers established a colony on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. Their governor, John White, sailed back to England for supplies. Due to the Anglo-Spanish War, his return was delayed for 3 years. When White finally returned in August 1590, the entire colony had vanished. All 115 settlers, including White's own daughter, son-in-law, and infant granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. The settlement was intact but abandoned. Houses had been carefully dismantled. There were no signs of battle. Carved into a tree at the entrance was a single word: Croatoan. Croatoan was the name of a nearby island and a friendly indigenous tribe. White assumed the colonists had relocated, but before he could investigate, a storm forced his ships back to England. He never returned. Subsequent expeditions across the 17th century reported scattered rumors of light-skinned, gray-eyed indigenous people in the interior of what is now North Carolina, some of whom claimed European ancestry. No definitive remains, no archaeological site, and no documentary evidence of the colony's fate has ever been confirmed. Over 430 years later, it is still called the Lost Colony. 115 English settlers. 1 carved word, no bodies, no answer. 10 cases, hundreds of lives, centuries of investigation. Every one of these disappearances has been studied by experts, hunted by amateurs, and pored over by relatives until the trail grew cold. And yet the same question remains: where did they go?